Oppo just created the slimmest foldable phone out there, and they call it the Find N5. To give you an idea of how slim it actually is, you see the USB-C ports that you usually have in your phones nowadays? The Find N5 has a USB-C port, and the entire thing is 4 millimeters. The Find N5, when it's opened up, is 4.2 millimeters. So now they just barely fit the USB-C port. What's gonna happen when it's too slim for the USB-C port? When it's closed, it's 8.9 millimeters, and I mean, that doubles it, more than doubles it, but it's still pretty slim. 8.9 millimeters is actually just about as slim as the iPhone 16 Pro Max. So that means this foldable phone is basically the same size as a normal bar phone. So that tells you something. Back then, foldable phones used to be so thick, they weren't durable at all. But now the fact that it's so slim and beats a lot of normal bar phones, that says something. That's also as slim as a pencil, and it's also 229 grams, which is as light as a coffee cup, depending on what type of coffee cup you have. The outer display is 6.6 inches, which is just 0.3 inches below the normal bar phones like the iPhone 16 Pro Max and the S25 Ultra, but that's pretty close. We're getting there. Do you guys remember the old bezels that used to be on the old foldable phones? The fact that those bezels are basically almost gone, foldable phones are progressing. The inner display is 8.1 inches, so that's basically a small tablet. It actually has more screen space than the iPad mini. I do have more to say about the screen space thing when it's like compared to the iPad mini, and I'll talk about that later on. It has a titanium alloy flex ion hinge, so titanium, the entire thing isn't titanium like the S25 Ultra and the iPhone 16 Pro Max, even though for those phones it's just a frame that's titanium, but at least they're implementing this strong titanium with a good strength to weight ratio, so at least they're implementing it. And they say it makes it 36% stronger, so that means it's a lot more resistant to bending. It's IPX6, IPX8, and IPX9 like when it comes to water and dust resistance, so that means it can take a lot more than Samsung's foldable phone can take. As for the glass on the outer display, it's an ultra thin nanocrystal glass that they say is 20% stronger. It's 20% more puncture resistant. As for the inner display, it has a double shielded flexible inner glass, and they say it's 70% stronger and 30% more bend resistant. Getting into the displays, the outer display can actually go to 2,450 nits, like when it comes to peak brightness, and it actually has a 120 hertz refresh rate, which is a common thing these days, and it also supports HDR10+. It's the same basic story for the inner display, except the peak brightness is 2,100 nits. As for the battery, they actually did something that's very similar to what OnePlus did with the OnePlus 13. Despite the phone being a lot slimmer, they made the battery bigger. It's 17% bigger, and now it's a 5,600 milliamp hour battery. Just like with the OnePlus 13, the way they were able to do that was with a silicon carbon battery. Now, most average batteries are lithium ion batteries, so silicon carbon is something new and it's a lot more denser. That means you can have a larger battery pack, which is actually smaller than normal lithium ion batteries. With this giant dull battery, you actually get 26 hours of video playback. That's on paper. In real life, it's definitely going to be different, but not that different. You also have 80 watts super VOOC charging and 50 watts air VOOC charging, which is a lot faster than normal bar phones like the S25 Ultra and the iPhone 16 Pro Max. The iPhone 16 Pro Max caps at 25 watts charging, and the S25 Ultra caps at 45 watt charging. As for performance and the chipset, it runs on the Snapdragon 8 Elite, which has a 3nm processor. The CPU is 45% faster, and the GPU is actually 40% faster. The AI efficiency was increased by 45%, so it's always nicer to know that you have faster AI generations and things like that. As for the operating system, it actually runs Color OS 15, which makes perfect sense considering the other new Oppo phones run that operating system. And the biggest thing about that is that you can control your Mac remotely. That means you can like fold it in, let's say, the kind of like the shape of a laptop, and literally use it as a remote control for your Mac. You can screen share it onto your Mac and use it as if it was a mini Mac. And you can actually open up 3 apps at the same time with that. Not in like the Mac like control thing, but like in general, when you're just using the phone, you can open up 3 apps at the same time. And that's crazy. Samsung's foldable phone can't even do that. You could basically be grinding, working, and watching a video at the same time. You also have a seamless file sync with your Mac, so that means you can access your files and share your files very easily. As for AI, there's AI in the documents and there's lots of AI in the camera and photos app. You also have AI call summaries and things like that. In the photos, there's like AI image enhancer, there's AI image unblur, there's AI reflection remover, and there's AI eraser, which is pretty common in most phones nowadays. You also have circle to search, which is not surprising because it's a Google thing, so any Android is most likely gonna have it. As for cameras, it's a tri-camera system and it's not a 4-camera system. I know on the back it makes it look like it's a 4-camera system, but it's a tri-camera system. And the main camera is 50 megapixel and it's called a 50 megapixel hypertone wide angle main camera. That is a very long name. I really don't like it when phone companies do that, or when companies do that in general. I do not like that. It also has a telescope camera and it also has a telephoto macro camera. Now that's a very, very good thing that they put the macro in the telephoto camera, because when you have an ultra wide, most companies put their macro camera in the ultra wide camera. So that means when you're trying to shoot a macro shot, because it's an ultra wide, the sides are mostly distorted. So putting it in the telephoto means it won't be a distorted image. So that's a huge thumbs up for that. And with this tri-camera system, they have this feature called lightning snap, which is found in most other Oppo phones. Basically, it's when you take a bunch of photos at a very fast rate, and then that helps it like take clearer photos because it has a better idea of what's happening. That has something to do with AI, but it doesn't even really feel like AI. It's like something that's built into the system. It also has live photo, which is basically just taking a 3-second video right before the photo to make it feel like you're reliving the moment. Now, remember earlier I was talking about how it technically had more screen space than the iPad mini? Even though it has more screen space, you can still do things like in a bigger aspect ratio with the iPad mini, because these foldable phones are usually like in a square aspect ratio when they're opened up. The iPad mini is kind of like a landscape ratio. It's a 4:3, so that means it's not exactly square, you get what I mean? So the keyboard will be bigger, the video you're watching will be bigger, your websites will be bigger, all of those things. So even though it has more screen space, you can do a lot more with that screen space on the iPad mini. So that comes to show that if they don't fix these things with the foldable phones, like where they make it like a better aspect ratio, most people are just gonna get a tablet like the iPad mini. Even though it is nice to know that it's like your phone and it's folded up, that's probably what's saving foldable phones. Well, that's all I have to say. Like and subscribe. Peace.